Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would finally give my little fight preview, my final fight analyzation, my final fight breakdown, and my final fight prediction of the very interesting title fight that's going to be happening this weekend at the junior welterweight division or at the super lightweight division, whatever you want to label it as. Of course, it being the 140-pound weight class. And the 140-pound weight class has been very particularly interesting, really, over the past several years. Because, of course, at one point in time, you had that of Danny Swift Garcia and Amir Khan at that weight class, kind of probably about over 10 years ago, now that I really think about it. You have both of those fighters there. Of course, you had Lucas Matisse, the Machina, I believe the Argentine fighter. Then, of course, a little bit after that era, you had Terrence Bud Crawford, who eventually moved up from 135, and Victor Postal, who eventually was able to stop that of Lucas Matisse. Of course, Terrence Bud Crawford was able to completely unify that of the 140-pound weight class, then eventually later on move up to 147 and unify it. And then, of course, a little bit later on after that, that's when you had the Josh Taylor era, along with Regis Prograis and Jose Ramirez and some of the other fighters. But right now, the 140-pound weight class, even though it's a very talented division in my personal view, it's kind of in a free fall a little bit at the personal moment in time or at the current moment in time. And when I say a free fall, all I mean is that, this division, we don't really know, who really is going to be the next great dominant man within this weight class, at least definitively. Now, of course, it looked at one point in time like maybe it would have been Teofimo Lopez, but in my view, he had a very rocky performance over Jermaine Ortiz, and in my view, probably should have lost that fight. Devin the Dream Haney, of course, in his most recent fight against Ryan King Garcia, he ended up losing that fight. Now, of course, Ryan Garcia was caught on PEDs officially, and that fight was overturned to a no contest. But in my personal view, that fight was pretty much on even terms because, as I've already stated, anyone with a snack program, in my personal view, is on PEDs anyway, so it is what it is. And of course, there's some other names that recently have lost as well. Subriel Matias and Isaac Pitbull Cruz, who were recent champions within that weight class, they also have recently lost as well. And I've been telling people for a very long time about both of those fighters that those guys were going to lose not too long, overall after they ended up getting their titles because they're not meant to be long-standing level champions. They're not A-grade level fighters. That's not what they are. They're one-dimensional, come-forward Latino fighters. That's what they are. Now, of course, is that me stating that every Latino fighter is like that? No, of course not. But there's certain Latino fighters, the types that just love to pretty much come forward and love the pressure. And there's just certain fighters that really love to come forward and bully their opponents. And they pretty much can't fight any other way. Isaac Pitbull Cruz is that type of fighter, and that's why when he finally got in the ring against two boxers that could do the certain things, that could fight multi-dimensionally and in a multitude of ways, he couldn't beat either of them against Gervonta Tank Davis and even Jose Valenzuela, even though Valenzuela ended up getting knocked out against that one Dominican fighter, Edwin de los Santos, I believe, within that of the first or second round. And then, of course, Subriel Matias, with the fighter that we're going to be talking about today with Mr. Liam Paro, he ended up completely taking Subriel Matias to school, which I'm not really surprised about. Now, I did predict Subriel Matias to win that fight because the question was, even though I stated in that fight prediction that I thought Liam Paro had all the ability and all the boxing intellect and all the skills and all the boxing basics to clearly beat Matias, but the question was going to be is that could he really survive under the bright lights under a fighter like a Subriel Matias? And fighting certain fighters like a Isaac Pitbull Cruz or a Subriel Matias, or also with Mr. Richardson Hitchins, who of course is the opponent on the right here, as you're going to see, fighting that one Argentine fighter that he fought not too long ago, Mr. Lemos, I believe his name was, fighting certain guys like that pretty much come forward the whole entire time and they really don't have any other game plan. If you know what you're doing and if you know how to counter that type of style and if you know how to beat those type of guys and if you have a high level boxing IQ, it can be very simple. But even for some of the guys that have a higher level boxing IQ, that type of style can be very wearing, and very tiresome to fight within a fight because they pretty much just keep coming and throwing everything that they got at you the whole entire time. It's basically that you know what's coming, but they really don't stop coming. Almost kind of like a Rocky Marciano back in the day. Now, Rocky Marciano eventually got better as a fighter as he went along, but anyone who fought Rocky Marciano, you would always hear that the man never stopped throwing and the man never stopped coming forward. I believe that Archie Moore, who was the light heavyweight of the day, when he said that Rocky Marciano fought him, he said that he gave him a better fight than what he thought he was going to. And of course, Rocky eventually was able to stop him, but Archie Moore said that Rocky Marciano, that I believe that fighting him was like fighting, a jet turbine or a plane propeller. That basically, every punch that he threw and every punch that he landed ended up hurting him. And on top of that, he would eventually change the speeds and the tempos of his punches so he could set him up and time him with different shots. And the man just had unlimited stamina. Once again, for those of you that don't know anything about Rocky Marciano, who was just an absolute boxing machine for his day in terms of athleticism, not only was the man extraordinarily powerful, the man used to run 15 miles a day. But once again, not to ramble on too much here. That's why it was going to be a very interesting find to see what Liam Paro was able to do against someone like a Subriel Matias. Well, he passed that test, and not only did he pass that test, but he passed it with flying colors. However, in this fight, this is debatably going to be the biggest challenge of his career. But Liam Paro, of course, he has been a little bit under the lights before, not only against Subriel Matias, but also a little bit against Montana Love. Richardson Hitchins, I'm not really quite sure if he's ever really been in a fight to where he's been as under the bright lights as what Liam Paro was. But of course, that doesn't mean that Richardson Hitchins, that he may not have a chance here. But within this fight, I thought that I would break it down and give my opinion of who I think is going to win the fight. Now, if you're going to ask me personally who I'm betting on or who I would bet on to win this fight, I'm personally going to go with Liam Paro, the Aussie, the Australian fighter, and I'm going to explain a certain amount of the factors of why I believe he is going to win throughout this fight. But we're going to take a look at their face-off on DAZN. I just thought that it was very particularly interesting because this is definitely a close fight. I could see either man potentially winning this fight, but I do believe that Liam Paro has the higher boxing IQ of the two fighters, at least debatably. I definitely believe that he has the higher level of experience in facing bigger level fights, and I think that he also probably has a little bit of the better athleticism, at least when you talk about punching power. And I think that both of these guys can be a little bit too hittable at times, but Richardson Hitchins especially. But we'll see what happens. But anyways, let's see their face-off. Let's talk about it.
On December 7th, live on DAZN, two undefeated 140-pounders will square off in Puerto Rico when Liam Paro makes the first defense of his IBF title against Richardson Hitchins, who will make his first attempt to win gold. That happens in December. Today, they face off. Liam, just a few months ago, you were in Puerto Rico, a pretty heavy underdog going up against Subriel Matias. You come away with a win and your first world title. What do you think the public learned about you in that fight?
That'll go great.
Well, what I personally learned about Liam Paro, which is that I knew that he had the potential overall pretty much, to beat Subriel Matias, but it needed to be shown in the ring. Because there are certain boxers to where you take a look at them and it's like, well, they have all the potential in the world. They have somewhat of decent boxing level IQ and, they have great athleticism. Like for those of you that remember Zab Judah back in the 90s and the early 2000s, everyone thought that eventually that he was kind of going to take over eventually and that maybe at one given moment in time, even after a couple of losses, that he would always eventually be able to kind of get over the hump. But he just never was. Because whenever the pressure was on him in certain times under the bright lights, he would just always mentally crumble. It is what it is, And on top of that, he would just get a little bit too damaged throughout his fights. He didn't have as high of a level boxing IQ as what he needed to. And that's why every single time he was in a big fight, he pretty much got his ass kicked. It is what it is, Of course, the first time being against that of Kostya Tszyu. And Zab Judah was giving Kostya Tszyu some very good work within that first round. But Kostya Tszyu, of course, being the more calm and calculated fighter, he also had his faults as well. But, of course, he was able to catch Zab Judah. And, of course, he was able to finish him, I believe, in the second round. But it just is what it is. Adrian Broner, of course, another one of those fighters that looked very talented and very gifted. But once he started getting in the ring with A-grade level fighters, it was completely different. Now, in my view, Liam Paro, there might be certain things that he can do that, for example, Broner was not able to do, but you never know. So that's why it's always important to see it in the ring first. We have to see it to believe it.
I'm a true warrior. I'll fight anyone, anywhere. And I'm not scared to face no challenge.
Richardson, you knew going into that fight that you were the number one contender for the winner. What did you think of his performance?
Oh, I thought he came up with a, I don't think he came up with a brilliant game plan. I feel like he fought guys like that before, watching his past. It kind of was, Matias was tailor-made for him. He made mistakes, obvious mistakes. He capitalized and continued with the game plan. Held, moved, boxed. Simple boxing. Like going.
Well, I'm not really quite sure if Matias, quote unquote, made mistakes. I mean, of course, from, the two-dimensional standpoint, or, if we just take a look at it on the surface, of course, Matias, he, quote unquote, made mistakes. But when I think of a fighter that, quote unquote, made mistakes, I mean, of course, we can kind of claim that, but that would also be kind of indicating that Subriel Matias could have made certain adjustments. I'm not really quite sure if Subriel Matias really could have made any adjustments throughout that fight, because I just don't think that he's that type of fighter. But I understand overall what he's trying to say. But in my personal view, Subriel Matias, he was never really going to beat a boxer like a Liam Paro in the first place. As long as Liam Paro, the promising overall, boxing level that he had, as long as it was going to show up. And that was my question, because sometimes when you have a promising level boxer, the worst type of style that you can put him in the ring against is one of those guys that just comes forward throughout the whole entire fight. Like Sean Porter, for example. Sean Porter, in my view, even though he's an A-grade level fighter, I wouldn't claim that he's an A-plus level fighter. But what you notice about Sean Porter is that I wouldn't really claim that he's quite the boxer of a Crawford or an Errol Spence or someone like that. But you take a look at Sean Porter in every single fight, no matter who he fights, he gives them hell. Even Errol Spence Jr. and even that of Terrence Bud Crawford. Terrence Bud Crawford had a hell of a time against Sean Porter, and really, to be quite honest with you, probably was losing the first half of that fight against Sean Porter until he finally started to take over in the second part of that fight.
Like, it's like you can tell a kid in the street to do that. Hit him, boom, tie him up, pity pat him.
Is that why you didn't put your hand up to fight him? Is that why you didn't put your hand up to fight him? You were
And Liam Paro is trying to get under the skin of Richardson Hitchins. And let me tell you what, because I've already taken a look at this face-off. When you talk about who is clearly under the skin of the other fighter a little bit more, I believe that Liam Paro is getting more under his skin than that of vice versa. I think that Richardson Hitchins is trying, and I think that he's trying to come across as something that he really isn't, which is a super intelligent and charismatic and witty trash talker. And you kind of have to be born with those qualities. You have to just kind of have those natural qualities. Like a lot of UFC fighters or a lot of boxers, they try to be either a Floyd Mayweather or they try to be a Conor McGregor, and they're not those guys. It just is what it is. So a lot of the times you get these guys that take a look at those figures and they try to trash talk just like them, and they just come across kind of as an ass, or they come across as super insecure or kind of stupid because they don't really have the same charismatic nor witty qualities in order to become a very successful trash talker, in order to build a fight.
I'm a mandatory challenger. I ain't never say I want to fight him.
Why didn't you put your
I ain't
hand
never
up to
say I
fight
want to
him?
fight him.
You don't
I ain't
believe
never
in
get a
yourself.
contract.
You don't believe in
I
yourself.
ain't never get a contract.
And according to what I heard, Richardson Hitchins, after he ended up, beating Lemos, and we'll talk about that fight as it goes along, because they're going to bring up that fight because, of course, a certain amount of people thought that that fight was controversial, so I'm going to give my personal view of it as well. And Richardson Hitchins definitely did not have the most impressive performance within that fight. But once again, that doesn't mean that he can't possibly have better luck here, because Liam Paro has a different type of style. He's a little bit more of a boxer. When you talk about Lemos, he's a guy that, especially, for his size, he knew that he was going to have to come forward the whole entire time against Richardson Hitchins. So I just don't know if I see Liam Paro doing that the whole entire fight against Richardson Hitchins. I think that he'll put on the pressure. I just don't think it'll be to the same pace.
I ain't never get a contract. I was right there waiting for the winner.
Actions speak
And
louder.
I got the winner.
Actions speak louder.
Okay.
But apparently Richardson Hitchins, apparently he had the opportunity to possibly fight Subriel Matias, and apparently he never called him out or asked for the opportunity. Now, how true that is, I'd have to see for myself. But that's what I heard personally through the grapevine.
You've said a few times that you don't believe that Richardson believes in himself. You said the talk is kind of trying to convince himself. Why do you think that?
100%. You see, he's unstable. He's emotional on Twitter. That's where he has to.
And to be quite honest with you, he comes across as a fighter that's also trying to speak something into existence as well. I do have to agree a little bit with Liam Paro. Now, sometimes, fighters, they do that, and, they still do truly believe in themselves. I'm not saying that Richardson Hitchins doesn't believe that he don't have a chance against Liam Paro, but I do think that Liam Paro does have him a little bit mentally rattled. But we're going to see in this fight, because if Liam Paro, one thing I'm going to be very interested in is that what's going to happen when one of these fighters lands a big shot. Liam Paro has shown me that he can take a big shot from a certain fighter and kind of come back and recover and get back to the game plan. Richardson Hitchins, I'm not going to say that he doesn't get back to the game plan with what I've seen in the Lemos fight and maybe some other fights, but he definitely can be thrown off a little bit more of balance than what I've seen from Liam, Paro. But I mean, we'll see.
Try to sell to the people, but not just that, himself. To try to tell himself that he's got that X factor. But look, that's all it is. All we see is talks.
Richardson Hitchins looks like a mini version of Antonio Tarver. Has the exact same facial features.
No disrespect, you're a good boxer, but you stink out stadiums. None of your fights yet have proven that you are what you say you are. So, December 7, meet me in the middle of the ring, don't run, and prove, not just to me, but to the world that you've got it.
So I got a question for you. You think I got here just by not having that
Now that's a very interesting reclamation that Liam Paro overall just stated there. It's a very interesting statement that he just said. He said, meet me in the middle of the ring overall and really show how good that you actually are. Now, maybe that could just be Liam Paro's way of basically stating that if you really want to prove how skilled you are, fight in the middle of the ring and don't just fight on the back foot the whole time. That could just be his way of trying to get under Richardson Hitchins' skin. Or that could be his way of really trying to get and manipulate Richard Hitchins to the point overall to where he says, I want this fight to be a little bit more in the middle of the ring because this guy is a decent boxer. He's relatively slick. He's a smart boxer, at least to a certain degree. And on top of that, he's lengthier than me. He's 2 inches taller than me, and he has a 3-inch reach advantage over me. I don't really want to be chasing this guy the whole entire time throughout the whole entire fight. So that could be a little bit of a revealing, factor that Liam Paro, that he realizes the level of threat that Richardson Hitchins is, and that he knows that he might be in for it if this fight is going to be him chasing Richardson Hitchins the whole entire time. But we'll see.
factor. Do you know my background as a fighter, as a boxer? I got a heavy pedigree, bro. Like from the amateurs. I've been at the biggest stage in every, like, from 13 or 14, from 17 Olympics, and I'm here, and I'm going to take a world title.
Okay.
I'm going to take your title.
Okay.
You're going to see us level.
Keep that energy. Like I said, give the Puerto Rican people what they deserve. A fight. Don't run.
Man, this is the same thing.
And there goes Liam Paro again, basically stating that don't run. Once again, what that tells me a little bit is that he realizes the threat that Richardson Hitchins is, and that he knows that he's going to have to be very sharp and calculated, and that he's going to have to put the pressure on a little bit against Richardson Hitchins, which is exactly what he is going to have to do. In my personal view, if you're Liam Paro, you want this fight mainly with Richardson Hitchins on the ropes. You want to be very careful. You want to make him bite on certain feints. Use that lead hand to the best of your ability. Liam Paro, a lot of the times what he likes to do, and Richardson Hitchins, he also likes to do this as well, but there are different stances. Richardson Hitchins is a right-hander or an orthodox fighter. Liam Paro is a southpaw or a left-handed fighter. What they like to do is that they like to throw that lead hand, and then they kind of like to go a little bit with the overhand hook, kind of to the body or sometimes to the face. They like to set that up a little bit. And I think that both can be successful with that. But, a body attack is really, really, really going to be important here. Now, Richardson Hitchins, from what I've usually seen when he does a body attack, he mainly likes to lead off with the jab, which is very good. But sometimes I think that he sticks his lead hand out there as a rangefinder a little bit too often. And that can sometimes cause fighters to get under or over his shots or around his shots. Or, even worse, land a big shot over the top. So he's going to have to be a little bit careful about that. And Liam Paro, he seems to, guard to the body relatively well. But I've not really seen how he's going to be able to handle that lead hand jab to the body. So that's going to be interesting. That's going to be very revelatory in this fight. That could be a huge factor. So let's see.
You gonna get in there?
But Liam Paro, in terms of an all-around body attack, I would expect more than likely, at least, that he has more of a body attack than what Richardson Hitchins is going to, because at least that's what I've seen from the both of them. But I could be wrong. We'll see.
Don't stink it out.
Different.
Don't stink it out. They don't deserve that. The Puerto Rican people are proud people. Don't stink it out.
We already know what type of fight he wants.
What's that?
It sounds like you want to brawl. We can brawl if you want. You ain't no brawler. You ain't no brawler. You ain't never showed me you want to fight. You ain't never showed me you want to fight. Everybody you fight, you grab and hold.
We see how you went with Lemos.
Well, good on Mr. Richardson Hitchins for kind of catching that and not getting completely manipulated into that. But what I also will state is this. When you want to talk about who, quote-unquote, would be the better brawler or better on the inside, I would have to go with that of a Liam Paro. With what I've seen from him in the Subriel Matias fight, He knows how to use his lead hand to a great degree, and then on top of that, return it to his face. A big problem with Richardson Hitchins that I see with his lead hand, even though he has a good jab, the problem with him is that a lot of the times he just keeps it out there for way too long. Like I seen it against Lemos, and he just kept it out there for way too long, and it just led Lemos to land certain shots that, in all honesty, really didn't need to land all that much. But they ended up landing because, once again, he was backing up repeatedly in a straight line up against the ropes. So Lemos knew where he was going to be and his positioning. And then on top of that, once again, he was just keeping his lead hand out there way too long. So he's got to be careful with that. He's got to shoot that jab out there, put that lead hand, and then return it back to his face and get the hell off the ropes.
Grab him, hit him behind the head. Don't hit me behind the head neither.
We see how you went with Lemos. Where's that? We see how you went with Lemos. A 5'5" lightweight.
Bro,
Gave
you
it
keep.
to you, boy.
But look, you know the crazy thing? Okay, you know the crazy thing? They keep talking about this Lemos fight. I don't bring up you and Alamo. You got dropped maybe once or twice in that fight and had a split decision. I thought, if anything, a fight's supposed to get better after a split decision. I fought this guy coming off the streets, coming off not fighting with Major Promotions, none of that.
I took Alamo's O.
It don't matter. It don't matter. Listen, he dropped you. He dropped your jaw. And I heard he dropped you twice.
And to Mr. Richardson Hitchins' credit, who is bringing up that point, for those of you that don't know, that long ago, there was a fighter, I believe, by the name of Alamo, that had a very tough fight with Liam Paro. And to be fair, a lot of people thought that Paro lost that fight. Now, to be fair, I've never personally watched that fight myself. But of course, that also being stated, it's not like Richardson Hitchins. It's not like he has a completely unstained record, because Richardson Hitchins, of course, he ended up getting that win over Lemos. And if you're just asking me personally who I thought won that fight, because, I've already stated on this channel quite a bit that many people claim fights are quote-unquote robberies, and they really don't know what the hell they're talking about whatsoever. Like a lot of people claim that the Better B versus Bevo fight was a robbery. No, that fight was not a robbery. Better B deserved to win that fight, at least in my personal view. He was more of the effective aggressor and hurt Bevo a little bit more, especially down the stretch, and, was throwing more later on down the line throughout the fight. A lot of people thought the Katie Taylor versus Serrano fights were robberies. No, those fights were not robberies. Katie Taylor deserved to just pull out of those fights. But that being stated, when we talk about the Richardson Hitchins versus, Lemos fight, in my personal view, that fight was a quote-unquote robbery. And I do not say that very often. When I was watching the first half of that fight, I gave the first 3 rounds to Lemos. I gave the next 3 rounds, to Richardson. And then when you talk about the next couple of rounds, I was starting to give them to Lemos. And then, to be honest with you, pretty much from round 8 words onward, I thought it was a pretty clear fight for Lemos. So the fact that all 3 judges scored it for Richardson, Hitchins, and on top of that, you had Tim Cheatham, who, to be quite honest with you, probably needs to get suspended as a judge, because this is now a multitude of times, especially within the past few years, that he's had a little bit of questionable scorecards, because the man scored it 9 rounds to 3 for Richardson Hitchins, and I don't know how you scored that fight for Richardson Hitchins really in the first place, but if you score for Richardson Hitchins, especially 9 rounds to 3, you have had to have had some money slipped under the table, or in some sort of way, overall, you're not competent as a judge. So after that fight, in all honesty, those judges, in my personal view, should have been suspended. At least, Tim Cheatham, because that was absolutely ridiculous.
And then look, I came in here when I fought Alamo a year after he fought me. I swear to God, bro, that was like being in the ring. It was like being in the ring with a novice, bro.
12% of people said that I won that fight.
What?
No, that was a close fight. Yes, but look
Why
at
you
yours.
got dropped? Why was it a split decision? Alamo,
Why did 90% of the world say you lost your fight?
No round versus me and Alamo was close. You gonna see his levels.
I took his
Oh, so
O. He was already damaged.
He just didn't know how to fight after that? He just didn't know how to fight after that?
I took his O. He was already
Man,
damaged.
you just talking. You gonna see, bro.
Me talking? Okay.
You gonna see.
You said recently.
Okay.
I don't think you've said recently.
Compare opponents. That's what we doing. I ain't never bring up Alamo.
You've talked about
It's
He's only as good as your last fight, so they say.
Okay.
You've used
3,
that
4
word a
years
lot.
ago.
Watch that fight over again.
I will.
You've used
You
that
thought I
word
lost
a
that
lot.
fight? Did you think I lost
Lemos?
that fight? Yeah, you thought I
Me
lost
and
that fight?
90% of the world.
Richardson Hitchins, almost everybody thought that you lost that fight. I was even looking at a video of Dante's Boxing Nation, who is one of the most racist and pro-racial and biggest LDBC and new media members out there. And he even said that he thought that Lemos won that fight. You know overall that it's bad when Dante's Boxing Nation says that you possibly lost that fight, and you're a great Black American talent, because Dante's Boxing Nation is always going to be politically overall, correct in terms of his favorite fighters.
Seen that?
You thought I lost that fight?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, man, you don't.
Not only do I think that you lost that fight, Richardson Hitchins, but to be honest with you, that fight was probably one of the bigger robberies that I can remember in recent history. When I talk about certain robberies in recent history that I can remember within the past 10 plus years, I think of Araceli Lara versus Paul Williams. I think of Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury the first go around because I thought Fury clearly should have won that fight. And I think of Richardson Hitchins versus Lemos. That fight was a terrible scorecard. And also, let me not forget Timothy Bradley versus Manny Pacquiao 1. Complete bogus scorecard.
Shit about boxing.
Okay, well, we'll see.
Oh, okay.
We'll see.
You've used the word levels a lot in the build up to this fight. You believe you're levels above.
I feel like I'm levels above him. Just like they talking about the Lemos fight. I lost 6 pounds a day before the fight. Before the fight, not before the weigh-in. 6 pounds a day before the fight.
Oh, but come on, dude. Like, no one's trying to hear that. But once again, let's hear overall what Richardson Hitchins overall, has to say, for the next minute or two.
That was not the Richardson Hitchins. That was a hand injury. Fresh off. I had to bring a vibrator to wrap my hands.
Oh, here we go. Here we go overall with the million excuses. You Deontay Wilder now, Richardson Hitchins? You gonna make 1,000,002 excuses? Was Mark Breland in the corner as well? Did you get poisoned? Was your what? Did you check your water? No one trying to hear that shit, bro. And I'm not quite sure. Maybe Richardson Hitchins, maybe he did have to lose weight. But no one's really trying to hear that shit. To be honest with you, it just sounds like a whole bunch of bullshit excuses. If not the weight, then also the hand injury also are bullshit. Just accept the fact that you didn't perform very well in that fight. You're still an undefeated fighter. You have this fight ahead of you, which is a great title shot. You got to move on ahead, and you got to admit overall some of the faults that you had within that fight. So hopefully, at least for Richardson Hitchins' sake, he is acknowledging some of the faults that he had within that fight, and he realizes that he's going to have to do a lot better in this fight than what he did within that one, because Liam Paro is a very seasoned boxer. He is a very, very intelligent, level-headed boxer.
Dude, hold his own shots, all type of shit to my hand in camp. That was a one-handed fight, and that wasn't even a complete meet. And I still was able to, I don't even feel like drag out the victory. I feel like I clearly won. You watched the fight. By the 7th, 8th round, you hit it.
You definitely didn't clearly win that fight, bro. And it's no offense against you. I have nothing personal against you, but at the end of the day, no, you did not win that fight. Now, I can't go too much against him because pretty much every fighter that even gets to end a robbery, there's very few times where I've actually seen the fighter admit that they actually thought that they lost that fight. Maybe with Muhammad Ali and Ken Norton, perhaps, but other than that, I can't really tell you. But when it comes down to it overall, no, bro, you didn't win that fight. I'm sorry, dude. And pretty much the world knows that you didn't win that fight. Even the biggest LDBC and new media channels out there believe that you ended up losing that fight. You lost the fight. It pretty much is. You ended up getting a very gift decision or a big gift decision. It is what it is, but at the end of the day, you move forward. And I've seen certain fighters of the past, even great fighters, get gift decisions or certain decisions that were a little bit rocky, and they ended up being great fighters. So once again, we'll see what ends up happening. And just because Richardson Hitchins looked like shit against Lemos doesn't mean that he still cannot beat Paro. Because Paro is more of a boxer. He's not really a guy that is going to come at you the whole entire time and just swing with everything that he has and throw 500 punches throughout the whole entire fight and just go balls to the wall the whole entire fight. That's not what he does. Now, of course, can he put on the pressure? Yes. But at the end of the day, he's a guy that does like to box a little bit more. And when you have a boxer versus boxer type of fight, especially comparing it to a fight where a fighter just completely came forward the whole entire time and gave it his all every single round, sometimes, they cannot perform as well, or they perform better, because that fighter is giving them more opportunities and more time to think because they're trying to box them and not just trying to take their head off. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to get in the ring with a one-dimensional fighter because they're just so awkward, and on top of that, you don't expect them to come forward that whole entire time the way that they're doing. So Liam Paro, if he does not play his cards right, it could end up being an easier fight for Richardson Hitchins or a winnable fight for him. But I expect Liam Paro to be intelligent throughout this fight, and I expect him to put on the pressure at least to an intelligent degree and to the point to where he's able to get around Richardson Hitchins' best shots. But we'll see.
You guys commentating saying Hitchins is totally in control. He's totally in control. Lemos land one punch in the 8th round. I weathered the storm halfway through the fight. I dig him out. I hit him to the body, catch him, hurt him too. Make it to a fight. 9th round, got myself back together. 10th, 11th, 12th. Went off with the victory. But they trying to say I lost the fight. That's what I'm saying. People don't know about boxing. Like, That's what I'm saying. You
No, sir. When people say that Canelo Alvarez ended up getting a robbery decision over Araceli Lara, those are people that really don't know shit about boxing or have an agenda. When people say that Sergey the Crusher Kovalev got robbed against Andre Ward, those are people that, don't know shit about boxing or have an agenda. Now, in my view, Sergey Kovalev probably won that fight against Andre Ward, at least the first go round. But at the end of the day, I can't necessarily call that fight a robbery because it was super duper close and could have really went either way. I had Sergey Kovalev only winning by 1 point. Certain people that say that Manny Pacquiao versus Juan Manuel Marquez, that those fights were robberies, those are people that don't know shit about boxing or people that have an agenda. But to say that you probably should have lost that fight, no, because your fight was in such a different realm. Because Lemos, in my view, in the first few rounds, clearly was mainly getting those rounds. And in the second half of the fight, especially starting, in my view, in round 7 or 8, he was starting to whoop your ass. It just is what it is.
what, bro? Like, what are you talking about? Like, if you feel like that's you're not Lemos.
We'll see. Exactly.
And you're not going to face the same
I'm going to go back to levels. I'm levels above Lemos, no disrespect. So we're going to see. Exactly right.
Okay.
So bring the same energy, like I said. Meet me in the middle of the ring. Show the world that you've got this X factor that you talk about.
What's the X factor?
Show us.
Being in the middle of the ring? What's the X factor?
Just show us your X factor. You say all this
What's
and that,
the
but none of
X
your...
I'm going to be very interested once again to see if Liam Paro ends up landing a big shot on Richardson Hitchins early, how he's going to react to that. Because he might have flashbacks back to that Lemos fight because no offense against Richardson Hitchins, but he comes across as a guy that has not accepted or gotten past all the demons of that Lemos fight. It looks like he's been more trying to move on from that fight. And of course, you should move on from that fight because, now that you move on from the other fight, you got to focus on your next opportunity or your next fight. But at the end of the day, you do have to accept, what ended up happening in that fight that went wrong for you, bro. So once again, we'll see what ends up happening with Mr. Richardson Hitchins. But if Liam Paro lands a big shot early, I'm wondering how he's going to react to that. And I have a feeling that Richardson Hitchins, that there's a possibility that he may not react super well to it and that he might start backing up and it might give Liam Paro a little bit more room and space to put on the pressure and really start to hurt him or at least start to put on an attack. But we'll see.
Odds are showing that. None of
Of course, the same thing could happen the other way around as well because at times Liam Paro sometimes does get hit with the jab or the lead hand a little bit too often. He moves his head off the center line relatively well, but sometimes he gets hit with the jab a little bit too often. That being stated about Richardson Hitchins, I don't think that he moves his head off the center line terrible necessarily, but I don't think he moves it quite as well as a Liam Paro. A lot of the times when he throws that lead hand jab and when he throws that right hand, you can catch his head straight down the center line if you're able to get up, within his grill and within his reach. Lemos a lot of the times was, especially when he was backing up in a straight line. Can Leo Paro do it? More than likely, but we'll see.
fights
What
are
fight
showing
you
that.
showing that?
Nothing.
What fight
My
you
last
showing
3
that?
fights.
What?
3
Versus
fights.
who?
Fighting the
Jacques
guy that you were
Robinson?
scared
That
to
motherfucker-
fight.
That motherfucker
But you
was damn near got
scared.
knocked out by motherfucker. I was
You're
13
scared
and
to
3.
fight, bro. My last fight. My opponent,
Who
you
did
not
you
once.
fight?
We ain't
Nigga,
heard
you're
of that
not
fight.
a fighter.
Come on.
You're a boxer.
Well, we'll see.
You got here about
Okay.
being a boxer.
Okay,
I'm
we'll
not going
see.
to discredit you. You're
Well, when you want to talk about who is a quote-unquote better fighter, combined with their boxing ability, I would have to go with Mr. Liam Paro. Now, of course, a lot of people are basing Richardson Hitchins' quote-unquote brawling or fighting ability on the inside off of that last fight over Lemos. And it's a little bit hard for me to just completely judge it off of that because, once again, Lemos is a type of fighter to where he's very dangerous to fight on the inside because he's so short and compact. And on top of that, he's relatively good defensively on the inside. And he's a guy that, is so awkward because he just throws consistently. He just swings with everything that he has. It's kind of like facing that of a Isaac Pitbull Cruz on the inside the whole entire time throughout a fight. It's a little bit hard to judge off of that because he's so short and compact to where, yes, of course, usually that would be a disadvantage. But against a fighter like that, it's going to be an advantage because if he gets on the inside, how are you going to compete with him on the inside against a guy that has shorter arms and that shorter length? He can duck under a certain amount of your strikes. So we'll see.
not a brawler. You're a
Let's
boxer,
go.
bro.
We'll see.
What are you talking about? What fight did you sit there? Sabrina Matias,
I
you
took the fight to
moved in
Matias,
hell.
too.
You moved in hell.
Took
Moved
the
in
fight
hell.
to Matias.
Your corner had to talk to you. Come on, mate. You can do this.
That's also going to be another factor within this fight as well. I want to see that when it comes to those boxing brawling moments or that dirty boxing moment, who is willing to fight better on the inside, who's willing to get those little hooks or those uppercuts in. And Liam Paro does that to a certain degree very well, but he seems to do that a little bit better on the outside than what he does the inside. Richardson Hitchins, he had some good shots against Lemos when he actually did try to fight on the inside. I just think that Lemos overwhelmed him to such a degree to where I'm not really quite sure if he had really any time to react or really game plan super well for that fight. It was just such a hard fight, and I've seen fights happen like that before. So Liam Paro and Richardson Hitchins, they're also going to have to win this fight a little bit off of dirty boxing.
You can do this. Like, you did not stand there and
Where
fight.
was you to put your hand up to fight? You didn't.
I
With
put
your
my hand
tail
up to
between
fight
your
you.
legs
I
and
put my
hiding.
hand up to fight you the minute I signed with Matchroom. I call you and Montana bum ass up. The minute. And your manager, after I forced to pay, your manager was saying, oh, he don't want to leave him to fight me. Oh, I don't want
We're
to.
after the big names, and sadly, you ain't it yet.
Okay, so I'm here.
You're mandatory, 100%. I'm not
Okay.
taking that away from you, 100%.
Okay.
But I want the bigger names. And look, I took the fight when you were my mandatory after I beat Matias. So this is it. We're here now, and that's it. December 7th, we fight, 100%. Like I said, I'm not discrediting you. You're a hell of a boxer. I can't take that away from you.
Right. That's why you say don't run, right?
Huh?
That's why you say don't run?
Not at all. I'm just saying, come and
Don't hit
come and
behind the
fight.
head.
Come and fight.
Don't hit behind the head.
We're in a fight. Let's
Yeah.
fight.
You're not
That's
even
the way it is.
He clearly wants you to stand and fight, to meet in the center of the ring. Is that a wise tactical move for a fighter like you?
I don't know. Like I said,
No, I don't think overall it would be a wise decision for Richardson Hitchins. Now, the fight could be winnable, for a Liam Paro if, even if he fights on the back foot or even if the fight is in the mid-range the whole entire time. And the fight could potentially be winnable for Richardson Hitchins, maybe if it's even a little bit more on the inside or the mid-range. But why overall would you really want to do that, especially when you're the lengthier fighter and you're the guy overall that is going to try to rely more on your speed and your length and your size? I just don't think that it would be advisable, in my personal view, to really fight, on the inside or try to brawl it out in the mid-range the whole entire time. I just don't think that it would be advisable, especially because when you talk about the power advantage, Liam Paro overall, he's probably the more powerful of the two fighters. And he has a very sneaky left cross and left hook and also right hook overall that could really hurt Richardson Hitchins.
I haven't ever been.
Now, that being stated, Richardson Hitchins also has a great right cross that could potentially hurt Liam Paro as well. So Liam Paro is going to have to be careful as well.
Down.
And especially watch out for those early sets up to the body early on, especially that lead hand jab. What he's going to try to do is stick that lead hand in Liam Paro's face, and then try to quickly jab that hand down to the body. But Liam Paro showed me, at least in the Montana Love fight, that he was able to avoid a certain amount of the body traps that Montana Love set up. Now, that being stated, I do believe that Richardson Hitchins probably is a bit better than Montana Love. And I think that Montana Love, of course, also is not the size of a Richardson Hitchins. Montana Love is about 5'8" with a 68-inch arm reach. Liam Paro is about 5'8", 5'9" with a 71-inch arm reach. While Richardson Hitchins is about 5'10" to 5'11" with a 74-inch arm reach. So this is going to be a different fight. But once again, we'll see what ends up happening there. But Liam Paro is going to have to try to avoid that jab early, as well as that of a Richardson Hitchins. And Hitchins is going to have to tie up very well. And when he does tie up, he's going to have to show Liam Paro that I'm not just going to let you bully me and pressure me throughout the whole entire fight. I can fight on the inside, and if you think that this is just going to be sweet, if you think that, you're just going to be able to bully me the whole entire time, you're dead wrong. You're not going to be able to beat me on the inside throughout this fight, at least consistently. And Liam Paro, to show Richardson Hitchins, he's also going to have to get some dirty boxing in there, get some good uppercuts to the body, really push him up against the ropes, get that lead hand in there early, get an early on body attack, especially with that left hook to the body, in my personal view, tie him up against the ropes, really try to rough him up and really try to intimidate him. And if you catch him early, you might be able to get Richardson Hitchins to retreat a little bit and get a little bit tentative to throw, because there might be some flashbacks still from that Lemos fight, which I believe is his most current fight that ended up happening.
Ray Drain Hitchins been hit by a guy that's coming off 12, 13 knockouts straight. Been hit. I ain't go down. He's been down by a guy. I fought the same guy. I didn't feel what power. I don't know in what world this man hit you and floored you, and I seen it too. I don't know how that man put you down. So I want to see where your jaw at.
Okay.
They all said
We're looking at
you
3,
say stay in the
4
middle of the
years
ring.
ago. 3, 4
It don't
years.
matter. My jaw was strong 4 years
Look at your
ago,
last
and it's
fight.
strong right now.
You look at
But
your last fight.
I'm gonna tell you
Should be
what it is.
should be
I'm gonna tell you
17-1.
what it is. You say stay in the middle of the ring.
Well, both of these guys seem to have a relatively good chin. I'm not really worried about either of their chins. Now, if you were to ask me who I think has the better chin, I'm not really quite sure, because Liam Paro, of course, got in the ring against Subriel Matias. There was a couple of times where he clearly was dazed a little bit, or he was pushed back by some punches, but I don't think there was ever a point in time in that fight to where I said, wow, he's in super big trouble in order to get knocked out. But Richardson Hitchins against Lemos, to be fair, Lemos was a decent puncher. He also was going balls to the wall the whole entire time. He was having probably more success against Hitchins than what Matias was against Paro, so it's kind of hard to judge. But Richardson Hitchins, make no mistake about it, a couple of times in that fight, he was getting close to being knocked down against Lemos.
When I hit you with this shit,
Expedia helps you find the right time to book.
you'll be able to take it. you better be able to take it. That's what I'm saying.
100%.
Because I know I can take a punch. I swear. If I can't, if there's anything I could do, I know
You're
for
telling
sure
me you're
I
gonna
can
hurt
take
me
a
with your single-digit knockout ratio. Let's do it. Okay, let's go.
They all say
I'm here
that.
to fight.
Liam Paro said, go ahead and try to hurt me overall. He said, go ahead and try to hurt me overall with your single knockout ratio. Well, what I will state is this. Just because a fighter overall has a single-digit knockout ratio, because I believe that Richardson Hitchins only has about 8 or 7 knockouts. I think that he only has 7 knockouts. Doesn't mean that he can't get a potential knockdown or potentially can't still stop Liam Paro. So Liam Paro is going to have to be careful. But Liam Paro seems to be taking this fight seriously. So once again, we'll see what ends up happening. But if I do believe, of course, there is a fighter that could hurt the other more potentially, I would say, of course, Liam Paro hurting Hitchins. But we'll see.
Okay, let's go. 100%.
Okay.
You dish it out or give it back. That's the way it is. Let's go. We're right here to fight.
What did you think of the Lemos fight?
Look, I thought he can't handle the pressure. 100%. And obviously the 10-pound rule, you've said it yourself. You don't like the rehydration clause. This is what it is. So I hope you're doing weight properly. I don't want no excuse. I want the best Hitchins. 100%. I hope that's what I'm going to get.
I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to make sure that ain't going to be a factor.
Perfect.
The Lemos fight.
Don't tell us. Just show me. Don't tell us. Just show me. That's it.
I wasn't even going to do the rehydration.
Whatever it is.
I was going to do what Lemos did to Keyshawn yesterday. Just come in whatever.
It still obviously eats you up inside.
They saying, nah, come on. You got to make the rehydration clause. So I said, fuck, I'm just lose 6 pounds tonight. My coach right here, I damn near got into a fist fight with my coach the day before the fight.
Look, that's in the past. Leave it there.
This
Don't have no
he gonna
excuses.
find out.
No excuses. Who cares about the excuses? That's in the past. You got a fight to worry about now. Have no excuses. That's it.
Agreed. And once again, the fact that Richardson Hitchins is, going so much on about that, not to be fair. The man did ask the question overall about, what did you think about that performance? So, of course, Richardson Hitchins, he has the right to respond to that. But it's very clear that Richardson Hitchins is a little bit insecure about that performance. He knows that he probably should have lost that fight. And he realizes overall that he did not do super well in that fight. So once again, we'll see what happens. What adjustments has he made from that fight? We're going to tell.
I want the best Hitchins I can get. So let's do that.
Be the best fight you ever fought.
Perfect. Okay, don't tell me. Show me. That's all.
Okay.
He does make a point that...
And I agree that Richardson Hitchins more than likely is going to be the best fighter that Liam Paro has ever fought. But Liam Paro for sure is also going to be the best fighter that you have ever fought. And in my personal view, Liam Paro is probably better in a couple of categories, just in my personal view.
You talked about in the...
But that being stated, Liam Paro is also going to have to be very careful and be very good with the angles here and make sure that Richardson Hitchins, because Richardson Hitchins can be very good boxing off the angle, getting around his opponents, using his lead hand and then moving to the side to get a different angle. He might be even a little bit better than Liam Paro in that category. So Paro needs to be a little bit careful in there and at least make sure that he's moving his feet and moving, constantly and moving his head off the center line, using his lead hand, keeping his hands up, but also not to the point to where, you're getting attacked to the body so ruthlessly. So once again, we'll see what ends up happening here. Of course, keep your hands up, but don't use the high guard the whole entire time. You are going to have to be loose in order to win this fight, in my personal view, and make sure not to get caught on the angles. Same with Richardson Hitchins as well. And if I'm Richardson Hitchins, try to stay off the ropes as much as possible. And if he tries to bully you up against the ropes, tie him up, occupy the vacated space, twist him overall to the ropes, get that lead hand behind them, try to set up that right hand to the body, maybe get a left hook in there and move your head off the center line.
Past, which is that 10-pound rehydration clause has been an issue for you in the past. You've talked about it. Have you resolved that issue?
I mean, like I said, when I fought Alamo, I didn't like it, but I felt whatever during the fight. I just never, I was making weight just like every other fight. Just going to make weight and eating whatever I want to eat. So my last fight, I just ate whatever I wanted to eat. And then when I looked in the scale, I'm like, damn, I'm like 155. Like 154 point something. Went to the weigh-in the next day. I lost like 5.
And apparently another factor that might be a potential issue is that Richardson Hitchins overall, apparently he tires out later on during fights. Now, I definitely seen it during the Lemos fight, but it's a little bit hard to judge because I expect him to tire out a little bit in the Lemos fight because Lemos was just giving them everything that he had. That dude was a little engine that could. He pretty much was just coming forward and wasn't really stopping the pace. So I expect, him to tire out a little bit in that fight. But could the lack of discipline or could the potential weight drain or something like that be a potentiality of him losing weight, losing energy later on throughout the fight? We'll see. Or is he just a natural gasser and making excuses? We'll see, because there are just certain fighters that don't have great gas tanks and they just naturally wear down a little bit later on throughout fights. Like Caleb Plant, for example. Caleb Plant is an excellent boxer, but Caleb Plant, to a certain degree, once he gets to the latter part of the fight, he gasses out. He just wears down, and he becomes more hittable. And the more tired and the more low stamina that you become, and the less conditioning that you have throughout a boxing fight, the more hittable you're going to be, and the less opportunity of attack that you're going to have. And Liam Paro seems to have a very decent gas tank. So let's see what happens here.
I think I lost about 5.
And let me tell you what, if Richardson Hitchins does tire out throughout the second half of this fight, and Liam Paro does win at least a few of the first early rounds, he's going to be in some pretty deep shit, because Liam Paro does have the power, and he does have the boxing ability to knock this dude out. So we'll see.
5 or 4.5, and when I got to the weigh-in, I probably was down to like 148.6, so about 6 pounds. But this time we doing everything right. And then when I did hire my nutritionist for the last fight, I didn't listen to him. Like, I went and ate whatever I wanted to eat. I was like, fuck this shit, I ain't doing it. But this time I gotta be a professional. I'm fighting a world champion. Like I said, Liam ain't. He's a great guy. He's a guy that's coming to fight. He's a guy that's training his ass off, and he coming to fight. I'm not about to play with this guy. Like, just like he's not about to play with me. So I gotta make sure everything is clicking on all cylinders.
Well, Mr. Richardson Hitchins, we'll see if you were making more of an excuse for those fights, and if the weight problem really wasn't an issue. I wouldn't really be surprised if it was, because the man probably, to be honest with you, is a little bit big for 140 pounds. But we'll see what happens, because the man is 5'10" with a 74-inch arm reach. He probably should be fighting more at the welterweight class, but we'll see what happens. Should be very particularly interesting. And of course, once again, we'll see if he tires throughout this fight or if he doesn't.
Do you think your pressure is more effective than the pressure Lemos brought?
For sure, but I'm going to bring a different style to Lemos. Like you said, we aren't the same fighter, correct? We're going to bring out what we have. We've got a good game plan, and we're going to execute it. I'm sure they think they've got a game plan they're going to execute too. We're fighters. That's what it is. Like I said, I'm not here to talk shit. I never talk shit. I respect him. He's mandatory for a reason, undefeated for a reason, and I'm ready to just get it on. Show the fans what it's all about, and we're fighters. We're fighters fight.
I just don't like how you said I got my ass handed to me. I thought you would know better than boxing about that.
Well, Mr. Richardson Hitchins, it's very obvious that fight still bothers you. And no offense against you, dude. You're a relatively talented boxer, but you got your ass handed to you in that fight, and that's not the only thing you got handed to you. You got a gift wrapped pretty much in gold wrapping handed to you as well, because there's no way that you deserve to win that fight. I'm sorry.
That's crazy.
Let it go. It's in the past. Let it go.
I'm mad at you.
Why did that bother you?
I thought at least it just sound like, damn, like, do you know about, like, boxing? To say, like, this fighter got his ass handed to him?
But obviously, it's a bit closer than you thought if it still gets to you. You look emotional about it. It's okay.
I watch it
It's
over and
okay.
over.
Agreed 100%. If he overall, once again, didn't care that much about it, or if he truly thought that he would have won the fight, he wouldn't really be mentioning it as much as what he is claiming. Even other fighters overall, to where, a lot of people would claim that they got quote-unquote robbery decisions. Like, if you were to tell Canelo Alvarez about the Lara fight today, and someone were to approach him and say that you ended up getting a robbery decision over Erislandy Lara, you ended up getting a robbery decision over Gennady Golovkin, he wouldn't really, overall, bat an eyelash that much, because he pretty much has an established career. Not only that, but, Canelo Alvarez believes that those fights were still somewhat relatively close, and to be fair to him, they were.
I know I
You got a new
won
clean
100%.
slate.
But you talking about a fight that I won UD. I'm not bringing about a fight that
Anyway,
you won
let it
split
go.
decision and got dropped.
I still won, but no one was saying it was controversial call. They still know I got the.
I heard it was
win.
controversial.
Well, Mr. Liam Paro, I can't necessarily agree with you that, sir. I know a lot of people that claim that fight was quote-unquote controversial, and that, to be honest with you, that you should have lost that fight. Now, once again, I would have to check that for myself, because many boxing aficionados, or I shouldn't say aficionados, excuse me, because I consider myself a boxing aficionado, someone that judges things relatively fair and objective. But most people, most major boxing fans, or most boxing fans in general, the main, average one, they don't know how to really score a boxing fight.
One or two people.
The judge,
Come on.
one judge. Other judge thought you won. No judge thought I
Anyway.
lost.
It is what it is.
And
It's
the
in
guy we
past
told
now,
about, I
let's go.
stopped.
Let's go.
With Eve.
Like I said, he was
Remember that?
damaged goods. I took his eye. The same hunger was gone. The same hunger was gone.
He was ass before he
It's
fought
all
him.
good. It's all good.
You know it, right? He was
all
ass
good.
before he fought him.
all
And that's my
good.
guy. He cool.
He was undefeated at the time. I took his eye. That was it. He wasn't the same.
I made
Different
fighters
hunger.
undefeated. Took beat like 2-3 undefeated fighters. What that mean? You the third.
All right. Keep that energy. That's all I'm saying. Keep that energy.
You've called him in the last few weeks kind of a one-trick pony. Do you think this is going to be an easy fight for you?
I mean, I never know. They get in there, and it could be. Now I'm talking about every fight I've been in as a professional. Really,
I don't really see this fight being quote-unquote easy for really either gentleman. I would consider it more than likely being more dominant for Liam Paro if one fighter is going to be more dominant. But you never know. Richardson Hitchins might surprise me. He might get in there. He might just be a little bit too quick. He might be able to hit certain things with Liam Paro that Liam Paro may not be able to see coming. I don't know. But I'm not going to say that this is going to be an easy fight for Richardson Hitchins. And the reason why I say that is because even if Richardson Hitchins is able to outfox and able to outbox that of a Liam Paro definitely is going to bring the fight to you. That's at least what I've seen with him, with Montana Love and Subriel Matias. He knows when he really has to up the ante. So we'll see what happens, but I expect this to be a tough fight, at least for Richardson Hitchins. I expect Liam Paro to win, probably, if not by unanimous decision, then by ladder round stoppage, but we'll see.
Been easy.
This, in my view, is about a 60-40, maybe 55-45 level fight because there's still certain questions that I need answered about both of these fighters that I really don't know yet. And this is going to be a perfect fight because we're going to get some questions that are going to be answered in this fight, such as Richardson Hitchins, how is he going to defend to the body and handle the pressure, and not only the pressure, but an elite level boxer like that of a Liam Paro, at least for that weight class, in my personal view, and a good boxing level, IQ level boxer that can fight somewhat within a multitude of ways, and someone that can really up the ante when he needs to. How well is he going to be able to adjust? And also about Liam Paro, how well is he going to be able to handle that style with Richardson Hitchins? Is he going to be able to avoid the jab decently well? How good of an inside fighter is he really? Will he be able to pressure Richardson Hitchins to the best of degrees? And will he be able to get out-angled in this fight? Or will he be able to handle that and show his own level of positioning the angles and using the angles to his advantage in this fight? So there's certain questions that still need to be answered, in my view, about both fighters. But that's why this fight is such a great fight.
Only blemish, or it was the last fight, and
the greatest of fights have a lot of questions going into them, and overall end up having a lot of questions answered after them. Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr., David Benavidez versus Demetrius Andrade, Alexander Usyk versus Tyson Fury. Certain fights like that. Those are the best of the best fights, to where we're going to have a certain amount of questions that we have before the fight, but then afterwards, they're going to be answered. This is one of those type of fights. It's not as big of a profile fight as maybe what other some fights could be, but for those of us that are quote-unquote boxing aficionados or big boxing fans or really love very good technical fights, this is going to be a great fight.
Know why? Like, every fight, really, these guys is really simple. If Liam was on a different level, I'll see. The world is hyping Liam up because he beat Matias. Liam know he seen that style over and over. Liam know that was not like nothing. It wasn't
right, but it's not just Mr. Subriel Matias. The man also has had a little bit of a run at 140 pounds over some former undefeated fighters that he took their O away, to his credit. And on top of that, he also was the second man to beat and knock out Montana Love, a relatively talented fighter. And he didn't just beat Subriel Matias, he took him to school. So once again, we'll see what happens. But also, it's very apparent that Liam Paro, when you take a look at his boxing ability, the man has great boxing ability. So we'll see.
Rocket science to beat Matias. My only thing when I was like, yo, let me take my time on Matias because of the IBF clause. I know the paces.
Well, I agree that it's not rocket science necessarily to beat that of a Subriel Matias, but of course, sir, it's not really rocket science to beat that of a Lemos either. And to be honest with you, I thought that you got a gift decision in that fight. So we'll see. But once again, Liam Paro is not a Lemos. He's not a Subriel Matias. He doesn't just come after you the whole entire time. He's much more patient. He likes to box. And sometimes that can be a great thing. Sometimes that cannot be so much of a great thing depending on the opponent that you're going to fight. Because that means that he could potentially, if he's a little bit too tentative to throw or a little bit too lenient in terms of throwing, that he could give Richardson Hitchins more openings and opportunities because he's giving him more patience and more time to throw and think through his plan of attack. But I expect Liam Paro to adjust. I believe that he has the higher boxing IQ of the two fighters, but I could be wrong.
He's bringing it. I know. I'm in my head like, all right, let me.
Is it because you got self-doubt? Is that why? Is that why you
I said, look. I said, yo, let me make sure that, I'm comfortable with this. But like I said, I never hired a nutritionist. Never did none of this. I was new to the IBF. I was just a pro. You make weight, you fight. Now this is something I'm used to. I already know how to go about it. Like I said, none of that is going to be a factor. The IBF, none of that shit is going to be a factor. I'm going to get in there, we're going to fight.
Perfect, no excuses.
And that's it.
Best man wins. That's it, no excuses.
There's no excuses.
Perfect. Leave it like that,
even
perfect.
Even excuses, I still put out the W. Remember that.
All right, okay.
So, Liam, how does this fight end?
With my hand raised, God willing, and still.
I'm going to say that Liam Paro more than likely wins by that of unanimous decision. or wins by that ladder round stoppage. Once again, I could be wrong. I could see this fight potentially going either way, but I just think that Liam Paro, I think that some of the pressure, I think that, him potentially landing some big shots, if he does land some big shots early, and I believe that he will, I think is potentially going to get to Richardson Hitchins, and I believe that he's the more experienced of the two fighters, and I believe that both of these guys are decent level boxers, but I think that Liam Paro potentially might even be more talented than Richardson Hitchins. And I think that he is smarter in terms of when he needs to turn up the pace a little bit more. And there's certain things that Richardson Hitchins may even be more skilled in than Liam Paro, for example, taking advantage of certain angles. But sometimes you can have a fighter that's more skilled in certain categories, but that fighter can win completely based off of boxing level IQ, or they know when they need to turn it up, and the other fighter doesn't really know when they need to turn it up or when they need to attack quite as often as what they need to. So we'll see.
In the new, Hitchins is back. Hitchins showed a spectacular performance. Liam came, he tried to be rugged, hit behind the head, go to the body, and got sniped.
You think he's a dirty fighter?
Hell yeah, I think he's a dirty.
Richardson Hitchins comes across to me as a guy that is trying to speak something into existence and is a little bit nervous for this fight. He's talking quite a bit for this fight, and I think that he's partially doing that in order to build up the fight and maybe make it a little bit more entertaining. And on top of that, I think that he clearly has Liam Paro. I think that Liam Paro has gotten under his skin to a certain degree. So I think that he's trying to do the same. It clearly doesn't seem to be working, at least nowhere near as effective as vice versa. It just is what it is. But we'll see what ends up happening. But Richardson Hitchins, he comes across to me as a little bit more erratic and a little bit more nervous for this fight than vice versa. So let's see.
Fighter. Hell yeah. Fuck yeah. Yeah, everybody fight behind the head. From fucking fights way back. Matias, behind the head. You look at Matias, you're like, fuck, man. This guy, him, Montana, come on, right? But he ain't behind the head. Jock Roberts, Liam, stop him behind the head. That's all you do is hit behind the head.
You just don't like the heat. That's what it is. It's a fight.
It's a
like
fight.
the fight.
Okay.
You don't
So
like
I
the
hope you can
fight.
take it the same way.
Bring it on.
Okay. All right. You got a human body just like everybody else, brother.
Exactly right. I never said I wasn't.
No, December 7th, title on the line, undefeated records on the line, Puerto Rico, live on DAZN.
Can't wait to see you, Liam.
It's gonna be good.
But anyways, that pretty much is about it for this video. I just thought that was very particularly interesting. That, of course, was my final fight breakdown and my final fight prediction and analysis of the Liam Paro versus Richardson Hitchins fight that's going to be happening tomorrow, the title fight. Of course, if Liam Paro is successful in defending his title, this guy is potentially going to be the limit for him in that weight class, because I think that a certain amount of the fighters will be willing to fight him, including Devin Haney, possibly Teofimo Lopez. And let me tell you what, Liam Paro could potentially win both of those fights. If Liam Paro is the next guy to completely unify that weight class, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever, because let me tell you this, there are certain categories to where I think that he's actually more skilled and more talented in than what a Devin Haney or what a Teofimo Lopez are, in my personal view. But we'll see what happens. You never personally know. It's going to be very interesting. But anyways, this is going to be a great fight. I'm very excited to see it. This is going to be a very interesting title fight. There was a decent amount of good fights that happened this year. But this is one of those fights to where a lot of people, they may not really pay attention to it unless you're really a boxing aficionado. But if you're a boxing aficionado, you're really excited for this fight, because once again, it's really going to answer a certain amount of questions for both of these fighters. How good is Liam Paro really? And on top of that, how good is Richardson Hitchins really? And did he just have one bad performance against Lemos, or is it going to repeat itself? Now to be fair, the man did have good performances over Jose Zepeda and some other fighters, and Zepeda, he tries to box a little bit, but Zepeda, in my view, is way more one-dimensional than Liam Paro, and nowhere near as skilled, or at least definitely not as skilled as a Liam Paro, nowhere near as smart or intelligent as a boxer, in my personal view. And he was also kind of done after, he got his ass whooped and stopped, I believe, by Regis Prograis. I mean, when you take a look at that fight with Jose Zepeda looks so slow. And I don't think that Jose Zepeda was ever a super-duper quick fighter. And it's not like Liam Paro is Barry Allen or The Flash, but he's definitely quicker than Jose Zepeda. And Zepeda, really what he's going to try to do is really land that left hand. That's pretty much all he has. It is what it is. But anyways, it's going to be very interesting. There's going to be a lot of questions that are going to be answered about this fight, but I'm going with Liam Paro either by ladder round stoppage or unanimous decision. I expect that in the early portion of the fight that it's going to be interesting, that maybe that's Richardson Hitchins' opportunity to really win more rounds, but I expect Liam Paro to start landing bigger shots as the fight goes along and starting to put on the pressure, more of a body attack, and really start to get to Richardson Hitchins. But he's going to have to throw consistently. And whoever takes advantage, once again, of quote-unquote dirty boxing, fighting a little bit more on the inside. If you're Richardson Hitchins, in my view, you want this fight within the complete mid-range or within the back range of this fight. You do not want to have your back up against the ropes throughout the majority of the fight. If you're Liam Paro, you want to keep this, probably with Richardson Hitchins up against the ropes at times in the middle of the range if you can take advantage of it. But with him being the lengthier of the two fighters and the clear bigger of the two fighters, you probably want this fight mainly up against the ropes, especially because in his most recent performance, that's where he ended up having problems, where it appears that he hasn't really faced all those demons as of yet. So Liam Paro can take advantage of that in my personal view. But we'll see what ends up happening. Liam Paro has a great right hook. He has a great left cross. He has a great lead hand. He has a great body attack, a great looping left hook. Richardson Hitchins appears to have a very great lead hand. He has a great jab. He has a good right hand both to the body and also to the head, but especially to the head. He has a good left hook, so we'll see what happens. This is going to be a great fight. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. I'm predicting Liam Paro to pull out victorious, but this is a fight, once again, that could completely go either way. Very interesting fight, but we'll see. Once again, very interesting fight, but that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see what happens.